Okay. So now, term skillful means we have used it number of times, and it is really bandied about by many people, especially dharma bums who know very little about Buddhism. And it's become like a catchphrase to justify anything that you do if you are a Buddhist, almost like that. Even sometimes Buddhist teachers make joke about it and so on, because it's a sort of a funny thing to say sometimes, you know. Now, very seriously, if you see, and many of you have asked me, is there any reading material and so on? Of course, there will be reading material if you search for skillful means in Buddhism on the internet. But the real in-depth authoritative study is actually only one that I have found over all these years. And that is a book by an author called Michael Pye, P-Y-E. The title of the book is Skillful Means, a Concept in Mahayana Buddhism. Now, this is the only very definitive authoritative study. And in fact, in his introduction, he says that he's found very little material.
Aspi, you find this only in Mahayana, is it?
Yes, I will come to that. It's mainly, not only mainly, it's almost only in Mahayana. In fact, our friend Nishita Jaktyani, who was in Dharmaren, who is from Dharmaren and in Bombay, her, I'm not sure, MPhil thesis or PhD thesis was on the topic of skillful means, is there such a concept in Theravada? So it will be interesting to see what she has found. And in fact, I suggested this book to her. And in this book, there are some references of where the word upaya, which means means, is to be found even in the early Buddhist texts, in the Pali text. So in a very different context, not the way it is there in Mahayana. So this author himself has sort of said that I hope people take up this topic. And he's absolutely right when he says that unlike other topics in Buddhism, other concepts like nirvana, emptiness, and compassion, and whatever, you know, all the stuff that we study, suffering, impermanence, this concept is central to the heart of Mahayana Buddhism. In fact, he says it is central to the whole coherence of Buddhism as a working religion, as a practical and working religion. And of course, he says that because when we look at the Mahayana, we find that there are so many teachings within Mahayana itself which seem contradictory on the surface. So, for instance, we have Pure Land Buddhism, where they say it's just the grace of the Buddha that can lead you to enlightenment. Nothing that we do will help. We are stupid beings. We are foolish beings. We have to surrender to the Buddha and just hope that he grants us the grace to be enlightened. And the other extreme, you will have say, Tibetan Buddhism or the mainstream Mahayana Buddhism, which will say, no, Buddha can only show you the path. You have to follow it. You cannot depend. Buddha cannot pass his enlightenment to you. There is no question of grace. Then you will have the Zen people who will say, just sit, do nothing, just sit, zazen. So even within Mahayana, you have these contradictory streams. And then you have Theravada, which rejects the whole of Mahayana, by and large, most of them. And the Mahayana, which embraces everything that is in the Theravada. Where the Theravada today, the position is, yes, theoretically, everybody can become a Buddha, but the time has passed. This is not the era for that. This is not the aeon where people can strive to be Buddhas. So this is just a sort of a, all you can do is become a arat. You can attain nirvana at the most. You cannot talk in terms of the supreme enlightenment of the Buddha. Nobody can attain that today. That time has passed. So when you have so many differing and contradictory strands, then what brings them all together? why is not Buddhism found in different sects? It is found in different sects and traditions, but not in the way, say, for instance, that, say, I was thinking about this, Hinduism. Now, of course, in Hinduism also, you have the Charvakas who are completely materialistic. You have the Sankhyas who will talk of Purusha and Prakriti. We saw of that. We saw all that. Then there is the Advaita school. So the point is, yes, all these similar strands are there in Hinduism also. But there is no effort. The Charvaka will never say, oh, yes, of course, we believe in, we are pure materialists, but of course, we can integrate a creator God into our philosophy. No, but no Charvaka will say that. No Advaita will say that, oh, ours is a non-dualistic theory, but we can incorporate the dualistic views also. There is no attempt to integrate. There is an acceptance that there are different schools and traditions within the Hindu tradition, which is Sanatana Dharma, whatever label you want to give it, if you don't like Hinduism because it is a colonial project. But there is no attempt to say, to integrate these different schools. There is an attempt to say this is the highest school and the others have to, take a back seat. And, if the higher school is correct, then obviously the lower schools are incorrect. Now, and also another thing I was thinking, that there are these different traditions in Sanatana Dharma came from different sources, in the sense that there were different seers, different sages, different times in history that they were propounded and developed. Whereas all the teachings of Buddhism, right from Theravada, all ascribe only to the Buddha as we know him from history. There is an acceptance that some teachings, well, some of the Mahayana sutras may not be the direct word of the Buddha, may have been developed later by monks. But those who believe in that, those who believe in those schools and those traditions, would say this is the word of the Buddha. So there is a slight this thing. Now, where does this skillful means term originate? In Mahayana Sutra itself, although there are hundreds of sutras, 108, I think, are there in the Tibetan Kangyur, the collection of sutras. There are actually only 2 sutras which really talk about skillful means, are more or less entirely about skillful means. And these 2 are the Lotus Sutra and the teaching of Vimalakirti. So, and in fact, in both these sutras, the title of the second chapter in each is Skillful Means. Now, of course, between the 2, the Lotus Sutra idea of skillful means is definitely much more developed than in the Vimalakirti Sutra, but we'll see why Vimalakirti is also important. Now, one thing to remember is that whereas the Lotus Sutra, in both cases, the sutras used today for study, for recitation, for worship, etc., are the translation of Kumarajiva, who translated from Sanskrit into Chinese. Of course, then from Chinese, it went to Japanese. Now, as far as the Lotus Sutra is concerned, we have copies, different versions of the original Sanskrit. Though they are in bits and pieces, and nobody has been able to compile a sort of critical edition of the Lotus Sutra, definitive edition of the Lotus Sutra as it exists in Sanskrit. But when it comes to the Chinese version, there is no such conflict. There's no such, fragments or any. It's a proper cohesive translation done by Kumarajiva, looking at various fragments, various versions of the Sanskrit. When it comes to the Vimalakirti Sutra, there is no existing Sanskrit version. It was, the history said it was translated by Kumarajiva from Sanskrit. But today, till today, with all the archaeological excavations and manuscripts found in different countries and different museums and so on, including Chinese who have done a lot of research, we have not found any Sanskrit version of the Vimalakirti Sutra, the teaching of Vimalakirti. So we go by Kumarajiva's translation. So when we come to the Lotus Sutra, Now, today we don't want to study the Lotus Sutra, but I will tell you how it sort of begins. So it begins with Buddha being in deep meditation. And as he's in deep meditation, and there is the usual Mahayana assembly on Vulture's Peak, all sorts of beings, humans, kings, asuras, dragons, kinnaras, apsaras, all that, millions of them from all the universes. It's like a magnificent panorama. And as the Buddha is rising from his meditation, there is a beam of white light that comes from his forehead. And people are now sort of nudging each other and asking, what does this mean? What is all this about, And then somebody says that, well, every time a Buddha has preached the Lotus Sutra, this phenomena happens. And anyway, the Buddha wakes from his samadhi and immediately begins to address the audience. And this is therefore one of those sutras which are called self-motivated, in that most sutras, somebody asks a question, like world honored one, how should a bodhisattva practice when he is like this, like this, like this? And then the Buddha will give some reply, which becomes a sutra when you organize it. In this case, without any question, without anybody asking him to preach, without questioning him about any issue, problem, or asking him to resolve any philosophical question, Buddha begins to preach. And he starts by saying that the door to the wisdom of the Buddhas is difficult to understand and difficult to enter. And then this within the first 3 paragraphs of the second chapter on skillful means. And then he says, therefore, I have used the ages skillful means to bring Buddha wisdom to common mortals and to teach common mortals. There is some echo, something is happening somewhere, like a burst of sound from some system. So, and to bring and to teach common mortals, skillful means to reach the Buddha wisdom. I think some mic is picking up feedback, maybe from what I'm speaking itself.
Maybe we can mute our mics.
John's is already muted. Everybody is more or less muted. Vasanta, mute yours. Let's see if it continues. Okay. So now, so I have used skillful means over all these years, all my teachings, to bring Buddha wisdom to common mortals and to bring common mortals to the Buddha wisdom. And then he says a few more things about the various factors of phenomena. And finally, sort of makes up this, the disciple before him, Shariputra, for instance, he says, you too will reach full supreme enlightenment one day. So now this causes some confusion. And Shariputra says a couple of things. He says, first of all, why do you now extol the virtues of skillful means? What are the skillful means? And why do you say that we will reach, some of us will reach supreme enlightenment sometime in the future? So now we are confused. Where are we now today? Are we still students or we have attained something? Are we still on the path or are we arhats already? Already, just waiting to enter nirvana, so to say. So the Buddha says that, he then begins to explain the whole idea of good skillful means. And at this point, when he says that I have not told you, so to say, now I'm paraphrasing, I have not told you the full truth. Now I'm discarding all skillful means and now I'm going to tell you like it is, Now finally, because I'm going to myself pass away soon, I'm telling you like it is, without using any metaphors, without using any means, devices, parables, all that. So at this point, 5,000 monks and nuns who are in the assembly get up and walk out. And this is seen as a sign of arrogance by everybody. And they walk out in an arrogant manner, as if to say, now, I mean, this is bullshit. Now, we know what you have taught us. We have been practicing. We know what we have attained. Now you are going somewhere else and, claiming to have some further knowledge, something like that. So here, I mean, of course, the Buddha himself said, well, all the sort of rubbish in this assembly has left. Now I can really teach you properly. But it's not just about arrogance, because what the Buddha is doing here is actually saying that everything that I taught you so far, now he's talking of a 40-year teaching career. 40 years he has been going around teaching, going to different cities, collecting sanghas. Now he's got thousands of disciples. Many of these old ones already arhats. Now he's saying that all that was sort of provisional. All that was just a means to bring you to that supreme enlightenment, or to show you the way to that supreme enlightenment. And therefore it means for the practitioner, including us, that whereas he has always said that the dharma is a raft to cross over the river to go to the other shore, from samsara to nirvana. But after you reach there, you don't carry the raft on your shoulder, you discard the raft. Now he's sort of saying that everything that I taught so far was provisional, which means you have to now transcend that. You cannot hold on to that. So in every practitioner's path, there will come a point where you have a choice of either abandoning those views, because the Buddha said finally there are no views. In the ultimate reality, there are no views. And transcend all the earlier teachings, accepting that they were only skillful means to bring you to this point and then go beyond, or refuse to do that and be stuck there. Stuck there means, yes, you do your practice, you will be an arhat, you may even reach nirvana, but you will not reach the supreme enlightenment of the Buddha, which means omniscience. The arhat is not omniscient. He doesn't see the past, present, future. He doesn't see past lives. He cannot read people's minds, completely at least. So the Buddha's supreme enlightenment, one of the attributes is omniscience. Now, these 5,000 people represent not simply arrogance, but represent those practitioners who refuse to abandon provisional teachings, or to understand. It's not so much abandon or discard. So it's like the person who has reached the other shore abandons the raft, but that doesn't mean he abandons in this way to say that the raft is not useful. The Bodhisattva still uses that same raft to bring other people across. And he still teaches other people how to make a raft to cross the river the way he did. So it is not abandoned in the sense that it is useless, so it was a wrong teaching. It is abandoned in the sense that for the person who has reached the other shore, it is not useful, but it is still useful for those who haven't reached the other shore. And as we know, the Bodhisattva takes a vow to bring people across and not to himself enter nirvana. Now, the Bodhisattva may be completely enlightened, almost as enlightened as the Buddha, and he has the potential to enter nirvana, escape from the cycle of birth, but he refuses to do it because of his vow. So the raft is to be discarded in that sense alone. So now others in the audience again asked the Buddha to expound a little more on this whole idea of skillful means. So now you see why this writer and other writers on skillful means would say that skillful means forms a central idea which keeps all these different traditions of Buddhism together. Because now we are saying that nothing is to be discarded in the sense of it was wrong or the Buddha was lying and so on. Now, this is how the Lotus Sutra begins, and we will see a little later some of the skillful means used within the Lotus Sutra by the Buddha himself to teach the idea of skillful means. But when we come to the Vimalakirti Sutra, what about that? Now, Vimalakirti is a story of a very rich merchant, a very rich businessman, who was a lay person, who was a disciple of the Buddha, just like Shariputra and other, but he was not a monk. He was a householder. He had wives. He had property. He's very rich. He's a philanthropist. He's also doing charitable work. And in that sense, Vimalakirti is the example. So in the Lotus Sutra, the Buddha himself is the example of a Buddha or Bodhisattva who uses skillful means to teach common mortals. Even arhats who have reached that level, he looks upon them as well. They have not yet reached enlightenment. They are like common people. Vimalakirti is the example, and the whole sutra and the stories in the sutra are about how he, as a lay person and as a person who has taken a bodhisattva vow, uses skillful means as a lay person in ordinary day-to-day life to teach the highest concepts of emptiness, of supreme enlightenment, and so on. So, for instance, I mean, of course, the background is that Vimalakirti is a disciple. He's got refuge from the Buddha. He's attained that. Buddha knows what he has attained. And therefore, and one day, so now we don't know really. One day, Vimalakirti falls very sick. Now, we don't know whether his falling sick itself was a skillful means. Because when he fell sick, a whole lot of people came to console him and be with him and offer him food and fruits and, you know, all that sort of thing. Visiting like how you visit a sick patient. So the Buddha said to his disciples, Shariputra and Modgalyana and Ananda and all, like, you know, one couple of you should go and visit this guy, you know. He is, after all, a senior disciple of mine. And all of them refuse. Because they say, no, no, no. The moment we go there, he'll start debating with us, and then he humiliates us. We cannot answer any of his arguments and his questions, you know. So it's a little bit of a humorous scene also, you know. There are many moments of comedy in the sutra where they make all sorts of arguments to get out of going to meet Shariputra. Because he says, the moment I go there, then, you know, he starts doing all these tricks on us. You know, he will put some problem, then we won't be able to answer it. Then he mocks us saying, so you all are arhats, you all are Buddha's disciple, you don't know this simple question you cannot answer, you know, all that sort of thing. And finally, Manjushri and Shariputra, I think, go. A few of them do go. And things like, you know, it's a very small room. And then they have a little bit of conversation and about phenomena and this and that with Manjushri. Of course, Manjushri is Bodhisattva of wisdom. So if anybody can argue with Vimalakirti, it is he. And then in the meantime, while they are arguing all these lofty concepts, Shariputra is saying, this fellow has invited us for lunch, but you know, where are the chairs? Where is the place to put chairs? Where is everybody going to sit to have lunch? This room is so small. And Vimalakirti reads his mind and says, Shariputra, have you come here to understand emptiness or to worry about where you will sit when you are having lunch? You know, this is the sort of thing Vimalakirti could do, because although he was a layman, he had that omniscience also to some extent. So the sutra goes on like that. There are all the expositions of emptiness in the most ordinary and beautiful metaphors and similes, which you don't find anywhere else. We find a lot of scholarly, even the Pradyaparamita sutras, you know, wisdom sutras. I mean, they are very complicated to understand without a commentary, and then you need Nagarjuna to explain them, and then we need somebody to explain Nagarjuna to us. Whereas if you read this sutra, some things immediately come across, you know, this is what it means. So these are the two sutras where this happens. So, and of course, you know, again, this question of abandoning something and transcending the main thing. So for instance, you know, if it is 4 noble truths, you know, so you are saying, okay, you have to be on the path, you have to follow the 8-fold noble path so that you reach nirvana. And now you are saying, oh, but every phenomena has the same quality. Its ultimate reality is what is nirvanic, that is empty of any inherent existence. And then you are telling us, now you are telling us that all phenomena are nirvanic from the beginning. All phenomena are nirvanic from the beginning. Then what was this whole thing about? And the Buddha in the Lotus Sutra explains that, you see, I teach according to the capacity, the time, the country, and so on, the proclivities of the audience. So I cannot teach. So if people are not ready to understand the concept of nirvana, emptiness, absence of inherent existence, if all that is the things, that the ideas to which common people are attached so cannot just start talking about emptiness to them. So I have to lead them gradually to that. And then they begin a whole series of parables within the Lotus Sutra, where the Buddha expounds some of these ideas one by one. But before we go to the parables, let me just read some things I highlighted from this book by Michael Pye, where, of course, in a much better language, but little more difficult language than what I have conveyed to you now, we can just see the central ideas of some of these things. And so the first comment he makes in the introduction is that, well, you know, of course, skillful means is a Buddhist concept, but can we use it? Can we use it in interfaith dialogue? Can we use it to understand why there are so many religions, but there is a common intent? For each religion is trying to take ordinary human beings who have this attachment to certain ideas and views to a transcendental level where you see things in a non-dual way, or even if you see them in a dual way, if you believe in the existence of God and so on, you see that the methods given to you in that religion are also skillful means to reach God or to reach whatever is your view. That they themselves are not strictly by themselves. There is no strict discipline that has to be followed. That the strict discipline is only a skillful means. So, in a sense, now you just think about it. In the Lotus Sutra, finally you come to the climax of the Lotus Sutra where the Buddha says, well, you know, I have always been with you. And from time to time, I take birth. Now you look at what Krishna says in the Bhagavad Gita, that I always come into this world when the Dharma is in danger and blah, blah. And then you'll have, so what would you think of a person like, say, Sai Baba of Siddhi? Sai Baba of Siddhi, nobody ever knew what his religion was. He was found as an abandoned baby in the forest, and he was raised by a Brahmin family. Today, the Hindu Brahmin says, so he was a Brahmin, but nobody knows whether he was, because when it came to giving advice, he would give advice based on the religion of the person who was approaching him. So if a Parsi approached him, he would give him advice saying, you take these prayers or these mantras from your Avesta. If a Christian, he would say, sing this psalm or read this part of the Bible or say these prayers. If a Hindu came, and so on and so forth. Muslim came, he would give directions from the Quran. So nobody really knew. And of course, there are stories of miracles. If you want to believe them, would you say perhaps that he was a bodhisattva? We don't know. So this is the sort of argument he's using. Of course, he didn't say Sai Baba, I was thinking of that. Or Jesus, for instance. So his quotation is that the wider discussion mentioned above, this whole idea of being central to the Buddhist contradictions, has so far been pursued mainly in the area of Buddhist-Christian dialogue, although there is no reason why other religious traditions should not be drawn in by those with the competence to do so. The religious culture of India is often regarded as multifaceted and flexible, though individual cults have a firm enough identity, while the style of religious practice in China and elsewhere in East Asia is widely understood to be practically pragmatic, as in important respects it surely is. So this is one passing statement he makes, and we can reflect upon it. And of course, in India, we have this, I don't think I can quote the Sanskrit, but, where they say that all paths lead to one goal and so on and so forth, And that's why India has been such an inclusive society in terms of embracing any religion that came into it, because they just saw it as another skillful means, I would say, to reach whatever is your goal, to reach God, to reach non-duality, to be one with the universe, whatever be your goal. But the next quotation is, skillful means is not just about doing anything anywhere without coherence, nor is it simply about the peripherals of religion as it is sometimes assumed. On the contrary, thinking about skillful means takes us to the heart of the matter. So that is one. There was a thought which came to me which just escaped. Okay, so Mahayanists claim, and not without some justice, that skillful means is the key to the understanding of Buddhism in general. Okay, so the term itself, skillful means. So now, by the time the Buddha began teaching, or Buddha was born and he began teaching, Sanskrit was a very well-established language, completely sophisticated, complete in itself, you know. So in Sanskrit, there is a word, upaya. Upaya in Sanskrit simply means, a method, stratagem, blah, blah. So, one second, let me get that. So, the word is means. So, when Buddhism was written in Sanskrit, because the Mahayana Sutras are all written in Sanskrit, simply using the word upaya would not do, because it could mean opportunistic, it could mean a stratagem, and so on. So, for instance, he gives this example, you know, of a so-called skillful means. You remember at the beginning of today's session, I said that it's just, you know, bandied about by anybody. So he says there is a story of the Brahmin and his goat. And the Brahmin, the term is used of a trick devised by 3 robbers who managed to deprive a Brahmin of a goat which he had bought for a sacrifice. They simply asked him whether he was sure it was not a dog. So he tells the guy, the Brahmin who is holding a goat with a rope, he says, "Are you sure this is not a dog? Is it a goat?" And because the dog would count as unclean and cannot be offered as a sacrifice. And continued to ask him this until he became quite unsure of himself and finally abandoned the animal by the roadside. Now, this is a skillful way of tricking the fellow, and kept on badgering him. No, we all feel it's a dog. No, it's so, look, this is so unclean, and no, this will just, you'll lose your caste. And finally, he leaves the animal. Now, he said, this is not skillful means. So we have to be very clear that skillful means is used and devised and sort of invented, so to say, by Buddhas and Bodhisattvas. So strategies that we work out with our limited knowledge and so-called skill and intelligence and genius is not skillful means in the Buddhist sense. If it is not taught to you by a Buddha, if it is not there within the tradition, then unless you are a Bodhisattva yourself or a Buddha yourself, this would not count as skillful means. And so the skillful means, what skillful means are we to use? What the Buddha has taught. Therefore, you have in different traditions, somebody says, okay, the Buddha taught that this mantra, this sutra recitation, this type of offering, this type of visualization, this type of observing the breath, these are the skillful means taught to us by the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas. And those are the ones we have to use them. So for instance, in Soka Gakkai, when Basanta and I were there, you know, sometimes the leaders would say things like, you know, don't talk to so-and-so person because it will spoil your karma. Or you have to come for the meeting. It's very crucial because you are going through this problem. And if you don't come for the meeting on Sunday, you know, I cannot ensure you that you will get that job in the interview next week. Now, this is not skillful means. This is manipulation and twisting people's, you know, playing and, you know, screwing around with people's minds. The Buddha never did anything of this sort. And he never taught us at least to do anything like this. So now I was coming to that. So in Sanskrit, the word was upaya. So when it came to the Buddhist concept of skillful means, you had to qualify that. So they use upaya kaushalya, skillful means, or skillfulness in means. Now there are slight difference. No, skillful means would be skillful as an adjective for means. What type of means skillful means? Whereas skillfulness in means refers to a quality not of the means, but of the bodhisattva. the Bodhisattva's skillfulness in using means, which are sanctioned and taught by the Buddha and so on. So now, when similarly in China, the word for upaya was fangpian, which again simply means. Okay. So the Japanese also had to always qualify by using skillfulness in means. But when Kumarajiva translated, they say that he was a little careless about this. Careless because by that time it was established that whether you say upaya or whether you say upaya kaushalya, it means the Buddhist idea of skillful means, not the worldly idea of manipulating other people. So, but when this went to Japan, in Japan, the word for means was hoben. But by the time, the whole culture of China, which was imported into Japan, was all hinged around Buddhism. So just as when, for instance, Buddhism went from India to Tibet, they had no Tibetan script. They had a Tibetan language, but they had no Tibetan script. And there were many words which were missing in Tibetan, by which they needed to translate the Sanskrit texts. So therefore, you don't find this problem in Tibetan language, because the whole script and the written language and its grammar was invented to translate the sutras and were totally based on Sanskrit and Sanskrit grammar and phonetic alphabet and so on. So when the Chinese culture went to Japan, by that time it was established that if you said hoben, it meant skillful means. It just didn't mean any means. This is just a little aside for, and of course, the character, the Japanese didn't have a script. So they used Chinese pictograms. So the pictogram or the character in the Chinese written language for fangpian, which is means, was the same character for hoben, but in the Japanese, when they saw that character, they would pronounce it as hoben, and it would mean skillful means. So even the meanings changed slightly, though the character, written character remained the same. So now the Buddha has risen out of his samadhi, and he's going to talk about skillful means. So the most important simile or parable, which is there in the Lotus Sutra, which is now famous in scripts and paintings and pictures, is the parable of the burning house, which is in the 3rd chapter. And there the story basically is very simple, that there is this very rich merchant who does what we would call import-export. He travels a lot, brings stuff, sells it in his hometown, and he has many children. Now the Mahayana always exaggerates, so maybe he has 3 children, maybe 30 children, maybe 300 children, whatever. And he has this and because he's been traveling and just collecting wealth all along, he has neglected his own house in terms of the building and the structure and everything. And one day he returns from one of his long travels and finds his children screaming and shouting and playing in the house. But the house is now completely decayed, is going to break down any minute. There are all sorts of creatures crawling all about the place, snakes, scorpions, pests. And on top of that, one part of the house is burning and the fire will soon spread to the whole building. So he stands outside and he begins screaming to them, "Come out. You are all going to be burnt now if you don't do this, if you don't come out." But they are so engrossed in their play that they refuse to listen to him. And then he says, "Okay, now I will have to use some strategy to get them out, some skillful means." So he says, "Look, I've just come from outside. I've come from abroad. I've got these beautiful toys for you. There are these beautiful carts. There's a goat cart and a donkey cart and a whatever horse cart. Come quickly and take the cart before somebody else snatches it. Take the one you like and the one you want." And so now the children rush out of the house. And when they come out, he offers each of them, no, there are no many different carts. There's only one beautiful cart, which is a huge bullock cart, bejeweled with precious gems and gold and so on. And he has one for each of them. So now the Buddha, after telling this story to his audience, he asks So would you say that the father was lying to his children? He's guilty of lying? Because, right speech, you should not be lying. So was he guilty of lying? And Charupitra says, of course not. He was not guilty of lying because his intent was to save the children. His intent was not to deceive them. And his intent was not even to give them any toys. His intent was to save the children. So obviously here the burning house is samsara. We are the children. Buddha is the father. He has to use skillful means. We refuse to come out of the burning house. Though we even know now that we are unlike the children, we know it is burning and full of suffering and pain. And so here the point is, so the Buddha then explains that I taught the three vehicles. So when he talks about a cart, the children, a cart is a vehicle, yana is a vehicle. So Hinayana, Mahayana, these are all vehicles. So when he talks, he says, I taught you the three vehicles because you were like the children who refused to listen. If I had taught you about the Buddha vehicle right in the beginning, which the father was trying to do, just come out of the burning house. That would have been the Buddha vehicle if they had understood and just followed it. Just come out. But they refused to come out because of the attractions of what was in the house. So what he says is, I gave you, now what are the three vehicles that the Buddha taught, which he's referring to in the Lotus Sutra? That is Shravakyana, Pratyeka Buddhayana, and Bodhisattvayana. So the vehicle of the voice hearers, like us who go to teachings and talk and discuss and read books, then the Pratyeka Buddhas, who are self-actualized Buddhas, self-actualized person. These are the hermits, the sannyasis, the yogis who go off into the forest, who don't have a teacher, and through their own dint and through their own perseverance, try to do meditation and whatever practice, and try to attain whatever is their goal. And finally, the Bodhisattvayana, which we have studied so much in detail with Shantideva. So he says, I taught you these three vehicles. So see, even Bodhisattvayana is a skillful means. Wisdom and compassion, two birds of a wing, these are all skillful means. Finally, for me to give you the Buddha vehicle, for you to understand that there are no three vehicles, there is only one vehicle. Now, again about this, there is sometimes a controversy, as scholars like to have controversies. So they're saying now he's talking about one Buddha vehicle, but we know you get to Buddhahood only through Bodhisattvahood. So now is he in this case also trying a polemical argument to say, oh, you see, of the three, Bodhisattva is superior. There is no question of superior or inferior here. He's not saying Bodhisattva is superior to Shravakyana or Pratyek Buddha or to Hinayana or anything like that. He is simply saying these three vehicles don't exist. There is only one Buddha vehicle. So you have to get it into your head. I mean, he's telling his disciples that. So now, again, he said, don't think now, the scholars say, don't think now of the fourth vehicle. Because the Buddha says, forget about fourth vehicle, there is hardly two or three vehicles. There are not two, there are not three, there are no vehicles. There is only Buddha wisdom. But I could not have taught you right in the beginning. And so now, going back a little bit, now, yeah. So the emphasis is put not on the fact that the children received a better vehicle than intended, which might after all be taken to cover their failure to receive the specific kind which were originally promised. You see, so you don't say that, no, you see, the father was not guilty of lying. In fact, he gave them a better vehicle than what, they were intended. So if the children were to take the father to court, the argument would be, but I gave them a better vehicle. What are they complaining? That is not the thing here. Rather, the discrepancy is justified by the fulfillment of the man's intention to bring them out from the flames. Even if they had not received any cart at all, it would have been inappropriate to speak of a falsehood, because the original thought of the man was, I will get my children to escape by a skillful means. So, thus, the Buddha vehicle, which transcends the differentiated vehicles, is also radically identified with them. So it's not only above them, transcending them, but it's also, in a sense, identified with them, because apart from the skillful means of the Buddha, there is no other vehicle to be found. Now, see, this is very profound. If you say that these vehicles are only skillful means, before you are enlightened, before you become an arhat, you say, oh, so these are only skillful means, so let me discard all of them. Let me just practice pure Buddhism without the skillful means. He's saying there is nothing like that. If you discard all the skillful means, there is no vehicle left. Apart from the skillful means of the Buddha, there is no other vehicle to be found. A vehicle means something in which you sit to go somewhere. And if you discard every vehicle, you have nothing to sit in to go anywhere. So it is also identified with the skillful means. So it like skillful means may be provisional. They are to lead you to the Buddha wisdom. There is only one vehicle, Buddha vehicle. And yet, besides the skillful means, there is nothing left for us to do except follow the skillful means, but according to our capacity and our understanding. Therefore, all in all, it is the Buddhist religion as a whole which is to be understood as arising from the Buddha's use of skillful means. In the verses, now verses in the Lotus Sutra, the Four Noble Truths are also brought into this context. Four Noble Truths is the first teaching, the very first sutra that the Buddha ever preached. The term skillful means is just slipped in with the second truth. If there are any living beings who do not know the origin of suffering, the first truth is there is suffering. The second truth is the origin of suffering. So he's now saying, if there are any living beings who do not know the origin of suffering and are deeply attached to the cause of suffering, like the children in the burning house, and cannot for one moment abandon it, for all their sakes, I preach the way as skillful means, saying that the cause of all suffering lies in desire. Though I previously proclaimed that you would cross into extinction, it was only the exhaustion of birth and death, and really it was not extinction. Anyway, so this is one of the parables, and we will take one more parable to bring this discussion to a close, because, and that is the parable of the phantom city or the magic city. So in this story, there is a group of travelers who have heard that there is a fantastic city, which is a treasure city where the roads are paved with gold and, jewels grow on trees and so on. And they want to go there, but they need a guide. And they finally find a guide who can take them, who says he has been there, he knows the path, and will take them to that treasure city. But he warns them. He says, look, the path is very rough. It is through forests, it's through jungles, wild animals, no proper water. We have to carry all our food and water. No proper path. We have to make our own way by cutting down trees and shrubs and whatever. And there are scorpion snakes on the way. Some of us may die, but they say, no, we are determined. We will come with you. And so they start on their journey. And 1 month, 2 months, 3 months pass. They go through all these difficulties that the guide had described, and finally they come to a point. Somebody dies, somebody is poisoned, somebody is sick. Finally, they come to a point where they are completely exhausted and said, forget it, let's just go back. And they were willing to abandon this whole quest for the treasure city. So the guide, now it's approaching sunset on that day. So the guide says, Are, now what do you want to give up? Tomorrow we are reaching the city. Look, if we just climb that hill right now, you will see the city in the distance. That's all we have to go. We have reached now. So they go up the hill, although they are so tired, they go up the hill and look across the hill into the valley across that. And sure enough, it's evening time and the city is lit up with lights and it's like a fantastic view, And of course, the gold and the jewels and everything is glittering. So they say, oh, at last we seem to have reached. Okay, now there's no point turning back. If it's only a day or two's journey now to reach that city, let's do it. So they sleep that night. And when they wake up in the morning, they find, again, they go up, they go and try to see, now in daytime, to see the city. There is no city. There is nothing. It has vanished. It was just a illusion. And they said, now what is this? You are tricked us again. He says, no, I didn't trick you. I was just giving you a glimpse of the treasure city. And I wasn't lying that it's not here, but it is now very close. So it is so close that, yes, in a couple of days, we will reach it. So now they are enthused because they have seen something, have a glimpse of something. So they say, okay, chalo, let's go. And they go and find the treasure city. So now, of course, in the Lotus Sutra, the Buddha says, the phantom city is the nirvana that I taught. And the real city which these guys attain is the supreme enlightenment of the Buddha. So I only taught nirvana. What he says, no, here, it was not really extinction. It was not nirvana in what you think is nirvana. It was just an exhaustion of birth and death. So he says, I taught nirvana as a resting place for you to gather your strength, to sort of recharge your batteries. But we have to go beyond that. We have to go beyond nirvana to supreme enlightenment. That is the Buddha vehicle. So, and of course, now the background to this is that in the Lotus Sutra, this story, they say, was first shown or first related by a very ancient Buddha many aeons ago. And it was related at the request of 16 bodhisattvas who were his students of that ancient Buddha. And the 16th youngest bodhisattva is our Buddha of this aeon. And now in the Lotus Sutra, he is repeating the story he heard from his ancient Buddha. So this is just a slight aside. So now I hope that this gives some idea of the idea of skillful means, the concept of skillful means. So it's not just anything that we devise, anything that we think is very clever. We will make a YouTube video of Buddha's teachings in ballet form, and that is skillful means. That's all very good. It's a good idea, but you cannot confuse it with the skillful means that the Buddha taught.
You said upay, the word upay, which is a Sanskrit word. I always thought it meant like solution for some reason.
That could be one of the meanings. He gave a lot of meanings: stratagem, method. So, iska upay kya hai? In Hindi, we use it more as a solution.
Yeah.
But in Sanskrit, it has more the meaning of stratagem, a device, or a method. But I am sure, in some context, it could mean even solution. Because Sanskrit is that type of language, no? Milind, you were saying something?
Yeah.
No, I don't know. Subhadra is, you are right. Yeah, but this is what I feel.
Yeah, that's the meaning.
They don't use the word by itself. They use, in Sanskrit, they use it along with kaushalya. So the term is upay kaushalya.
Yes.
The kaushalya part refers to skillful, and upay is the means.
Yeah. But the point is, it is used as upay kaushalya when you are referring to the Buddhist concept of upay kaushalya.
Yeah.
But you can use upay. See the distinction. You can use upay in many other ways.
Yeah.
And maybe one is also solution.
Yeah.
This is in contrast to the Japanese word hoben, where it literally is only means, just like upaya is only means. But even without any qualifying kaushalya word in Japanese, when they say hoben, it is meant to be the Buddhist concept of skillful means. That's what I was trying to make a distinction. That in Sanskrit, it requires the qualifier when you're referring to the Buddhist concept. In Japanese and Chinese also, it requires a qualifier. Though Kumarajiva did not always use the qualifier because he felt now it's all established, everybody knows. Nobody can mistake that I am using it in the ordinary worldly sense when I'm talking of such lofty things. But in Japan, by the time it went to Japan, upaya was translated as hoben, but hoben always meant skillful means in Buddhist concept. The only way possible is if you first are absolutely, if you attend bodhisattvahood at least, you have to be a bodhisattva before you can kill. Like that captain of the ship, I don't know if you remember the story. It is, in fact, that story, I think, it is in the Lotus Sutra, if I'm not, but anyway, the story is that there was again a group of travelers who went by ship to look for treasure on some different treasure islands. And they were now returning home with a lot of treasure collected on the boat. And within them, there are these two scoundrels, as you put it, who are plotting amongst themselves to kill everyone, kill the captain, and take all the treasure and the boat and sail off to their hometown or wherever, to run away with everybody's treasure after killing everybody on high seas. So when the captain, who is really a bodhisattva, this is a story of bodhisattva taking the form of a captain of a ship with as a skillful means, and he overhears them plotting this. So he takes the decision that it is better to kill these two people than to keep quiet and let them kill these other 400 guys and himself and commit this sin. So he actually kills them. Now the question is, killing is prohibited. There is absolutely no killing. It is written in stone in Buddhist ethics. Now what is this? So the arguments used are one, that as a bodhisattva, he would have some this thing of omniscience, that he could see that if he did not do anything, these 400 people would get killed. Now in real life, you may feel, oh, these 400 people could probably, maybe the killing will not succeed. After all, there are 400, they'll raise the alarm, they'll kill these two guys. So a few people may be killed, but nothing really will happen. How can two people kill 400 people? And you would have thought like this. Because of some element of omniscience, he knew that this is going to happen. He himself would get killed. So he decides to kill these two. So in the first case, his intent is to save the 400 lives and his own life. Secondly, he says, Godrej wants to sell me some property, Godrej properties. So now the second thing is the second part of the logic is, had he not done anything and killed these people, think of the tremendous weight of the karma they would have accumulated by taking 401 lives. Think of the aeons these two scoundrels would have to live in hell, stay in hell. Aeons and aeons they would be in hell for doing this vile deed of killing 400 people. And lastly, the Bodhisattva argues that because of my good intentions, I cannot say there will be no karmic effect on me. I will go to hell because of killing these two guys. You cannot escape karma. You can lessen karmic retribution. So since I am indulging in killing, I will have to go some aeons in hell. But did I not take, and therefore my own enlightenment or my own entry into nirvana will get postponed by that much. But then he says, have I not taken a bodhisattva vow to not enter into nirvana till I release everybody, till I can take all sentient beings with me? So I've already taken a vow to postpone my nirvana. So now why should I be worried about so it's better I go to hell as a bodhisattva, spend fewer aeons in hell or fewer years in hell than these two guys who will spend like almost an eternity, though there is no eternal hell in Buddhism. There would be for many, many more aeons and aeons and aeons. So with these three logical sort of reasoning, he decides to kill the two guys. But he was a bodhisattva. Now, if we do something like this, we will be justified in law, and even our karmic retribution may lessen because this would be a case of self-defense. But then they would say, was there immediate danger? Were they really coming to you with a knife or a gun at the point when you killed them? Did you use proportionate force? You use preemptive force, even just on the idea that they were discussing something amongst themselves. All those legal questions would also come up. And those would also be moral questions or spiritual questions.
So in that sense, a Buddhist could have killed Hitler.
If he was a bodhisattva, anybody could have killed Hitler. They had a plot to kill Hitler, no, and it failed. So that's not the point. And people would have applauded those guys, who killed Hitler. But we are not talking now from a purely worldly point of view. What are skillful means, you ask? What are the skillful means when we can kill? Skillful means what the Buddha has taught. And the Buddha has taught, if you are a bodhisattva and you can justify the logic that this captain of the ship had, then that would be skillful means. Ordinarily, it would be self-defense. It was, I mean, if Hitler were to be killed before, 6 million Jews died, well, that would have been a good thing. But now what would have been the karmic implication? But we cannot, because we cannot judge anybody's karma. The guys who plotted to kill Hitler, if they had succeeded, we know that some karma would attribute to them. But what about their millions of previous lives? We know nothing about that. So we cannot say anything about where they would have landed up. But this captain, because he was bodhisattva, knew that they would land up aeons in hell.
It seems to me, Aspi, that whenever all the examples you gave of skillful means and connecting it to the Lotus Sutra and things like that was more in terms of means to allow the disciples or whatever to attain better understanding of what it is. It obviously, in the ship example you are giving, that skillful means is perhaps of a different kind, not to kind of thing. It is to pursue a goal or whatever that you're talking about, or of like an engaged Buddhist will want to have a socialist society or whatever. And that seems to be out of the definition of skillful means as the way in which you have portrayed it earlier. So you cannot just use the word skillful means to talk about your strategy or your program or your what do you call a revolutionary kind of
right. You're absolutely right.
So therefore that particular kind of thing. So we cannot use the phrase skillful means. Some other thing has got to be added to it. Probably to whatever, when we talk about what should an engaged Buddhist do and things like that.
Right.
That's a totally different realm altogether.
No, you are right. Actually, skillful means, as the Buddha defined it, is to bring people to Buddha wisdom. He was not bringing anybody to Buddha wisdom on that ship. So that is definitely a distinction. Now, but to come back to what you said first, the stories in the parables in the Lotus Sutra, these are not, it's not that the burning house parable. What is he teaching? What is the teaching in the Lotus Sutra? When people read the Lotus Sutra first time, without any guidance, without any commentary or any sort of introduction like this, at the end of the book, they say, all through the book, he's talking about preaching the Lotus Sutra. I will now preach the Lotus Sutra. When the Lotus Sutra was preached so many aeons ago, by that Buddha in, eternal aeons ago and so on, you finally are left with the feeling, but what did he actually teach? Now, the thing is that actually he didn't teach anything new. The Lotus Sutra is not a new teaching, or it's a new teaching in that it is a teaching about the teachings. It's a meta teaching. He's teaching about the rationale and his logic for what he taught. By the time he is preaching the Lotus Sutra, which was one of the last or second last sutra that he preached, which was significant. So you can say the last significant sutra that he preached. He had taught everything. He had taught 4 noble truths. He had taught compassion. He had taught wisdom. He had taught emptiness, impermanence. Everything was taught. There was nothing remaining to be taught. But now he's saying, I'm going to tell you why I taught those things and why in those things which I taught, there are seeming contradictions. Why does it sometimes feel that I lied to you? If this is the case, if everything is empty of inherent existence, why did I teach you that compounded phenomena are marked by suffering? They have no inherent existence. Suffering itself has no inherent existence. Sentient beings don't truly exist. So why did I teach you all that? So these stories and parables are only metaphors. Just like the father was not lying to the children, I was not lying to you. Just like the father was using means to get children out of the house, my earlier teachings were means to get you out of the house. Why did I teach you nirvana? Because you are like those travelers in a forest. till you reach nirvana, you are so tired, you will not think of even supreme enlightenment. So I had to give you a place to rest, to say, okay, when you reach nirvana, all this suffering will be over, there will be no exhaustion, and you will, it appears as if you will be in a place where this suffering is not there. But actually, you are already in nirvana. Samsara is nirvana. There is no other place you are going to. You are only going to get some rest, after which you will be charged up enough to think in terms of becoming a Buddha or a Bodhisattva and not stay at the Arhat level. So, again, the parables are not the teachings. The parables are not the teaching, except that it is a teaching about why did I teach all those other things? Why is there some seeming contradiction in what I taught? And so on. And that is why the whole of Buddhism comes together, at least Mahayana Buddhism. And since the Mahayana accept Theravada also, it all comes together. So we don't reject Theravada. Why don't we reject Theravada? This was taught by the Buddha. We are not saying it was not taught by the Buddha. But on the other hand, the Theravadins say, oh, Mahayana Sutras were never taught by the Buddha. So we reject all of those. Which means they are like those 5,000 people. I mean, from the Mahayana point of view, the more chauvinistic Mahayanists would say, oh, these are those 5,000 arrogant people who walked out. They don't want to accept provisional teachings and transcend them to go somewhere further.